wanted to cover a topic that I think will probably affect everybody's practice at some point in time or another, and that is the fear barrier. So we call it a barrier because fear at some point in time is going to stand between you and a conscious exit projection or an out-of-body experience. And it's much more frequent in the early days, but I will tell you that even 3.5 years into this, I still experience fear from time to time. That's primarily just due to how profoundly real these experiences are and the fact that the out-of-body state is such a thought-responsive state, which usually is great and is amazing, but doesn't always work to your advantage. So I thought what I would do, just because I get a couple of questions probably a week on fear and how can I not be afraid and how can I bypass these fear barriers and how can I, speed up my progress. So I thought maybe it would be helpful to at least start this conversation. I'll share my own experiences with you. And then by all means, please share your experiences. Please share advice with those people, looking for ways to deal with various aspects of fear in the comments below, or better yet, in the Facebook group where it's a little easier to have a conversation. But I figured I'd at least start with my own experiences. All right, so for me, fear started as soon as I started making progress. So for those of you that follow me know that it took me months and months to learn how to put my body to sleep while keeping my mind awake. Well, as soon as I learned how to do this and actually started to get somewhere, I experienced that heavy lead blanket feeling that you may be familiar with, and it's basically sleep as your body starts to shut off. And for me, this always starts at the base of my feet. It always rolls up towards my head. And the very first time it happened, it got maybe right about to my knees, and I just panicked. I said, I can't feel my legs. I know what's happening. I'm going into sleep paralysis. I've experienced this once as a teenager. I've read all sorts of accounts of sleep paralysis, as you tend to do when you start studying this practice. And I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I want to do this. And I just panicked, and the panic broke the state, and it was over. So in this particular scenario, I had to do a couple of things. I had to, one, just repetition. I had to get to this state over and over again. I had to let this lead blanket feeling move up my body a little bit further every time. It would get to my waist and then I would panic. It would get to my stomach and then I would panic. Eventually you get to the point where you decide, it's not as scary as you originally thought. That in combination with trying to change my outlook, my mindset on the entire process. So as I mentioned, the very first thing that popped in my head was sleep paralysis. I had to sort of change my way of thinking and not associate this feeling with sleep paralysis in my mind. I tried to think of it more as a comfortable, heavy quilt that's being rolled up me and as part of this amazing process that I'm trying to learn and trying to, push the ideas of this is a scary thing out of my head. Because this is intentional. It also helped to, think about the fact that I actually go through this every single night while I'm asleep. Your body shuts off. It's just this first time of being consciously aware of it happening. It was just kind of an alarming sensation. So for me, that was it. I had to just kind of think about it differently. I had to reach the state over and over again, and it got to the point where it wasn't so bad. In fact, I actually started to enjoy the process. Now, when the wave of sleep, right about the time it got to my chest, I hit my second fear barrier, and that was this intense pounding heart. My heart was just beating like it was going to pound out of my chest, like I was going to have a heart attack. And this, I didn't know if this was normal. I actually had never read anything about a pounding heartbeat. So at this point when it started, I wasn't afraid. It felt very much like a fear-based, pounding heart. But I wasn't afraid until it actually started happening. And then while it was going, I was like, I don't know if this is supposed to happen. I don't know if this is a normal occurrence. And so then I panicked. And as soon as I broke out of this state, my pounding heart just went away. It stopped. At this point, like I said, I had never read anything about it. Later on, I read some Robert Bruce, and he talks about how this really isn't your heart, how it's your heart chakra, just preparing your body for this new level of conscious energy that you're going to be utilizing to induce this out of body state. Whether you subscribe to that more esoteric mindset or not, if you look at that from that perspective, it really actually kind of makes sense because, like I said, I wasn't afraid. at this point. My heart just started pounding insanely hard, and maybe it wasn't my physical heart, maybe it was my perception of this energy building. Um, but over time, as I reached this state more and more, that eventually just went away. And at this point, I don't notice it. It doesn't happen at all. So it very well could be that, it's just something that is just part of the beginning of this practice. Maybe I no longer have that need to build up that extra energy that I needed in the early days. However you want to look at it. But that's just one, you just got to get to it over and over again. Repetition is the only advice I've got on getting past that pounding heartbeat. All right, so very quickly after I got past that point, I felt like I was getting stumped right at the exact same spot, which was frustrating. That heavy lead blanket sensation gets to my chest, great, no rapid heartbeat, but now it feels like I'm struggling for breath and that it feels like I'm suffocating. And so to give you some background, the reason why it felt like I was suffocating is when that sleep wave reaches your chest, it's like your rib cage collapses down on your lungs and now starts putting pressure on your lungs due to muscles disengaging that you didn't realize you were actually using while you were awake. And as part of my relaxation process, I'm using what's called pranayama breathing, and I'm breathing very, very deeply, very slowly, inhaling to full capacity, and then I would hold my breath, and then I would let it out very, very slowly, exhale completely, and then I would hold my breath with no air in my lungs. And I found that this is a really great way to relax very quickly. I still do this while I meditate. But unfortunately, this particular practice isn't so conducive to this practice once you get to the point where this heavy lead blanket feeling reaches your chest. So fortunately, this was an easy one to overcome. I just basically looked at the problem and said, well, the problem is clearly that I am breathing too deeply, and that it then makes me feel like I'm struggling for breath. In turn, I feel like I'm suffocating. In turn, I panic, and then it ruins my progress. So what I would do is I would still use that same breathing technique to get relaxed. But once I felt like I started to make progress, I would stop with that, and I would start doing very shallow, very short breath, very short breathing, trying to still keep it comfortable, trying to keep it as natural as possible, but not move my chest as much as I could. Just try to keep my chest still while I was breathing. And that worked great. That wave of sleep would get to my chest. I no longer felt like I was struggling for air, and it would just pass right by and it would reach my head. Now, I will say the first time that wave of sleep paralysis reached my head, it was alarming enough to make me break out of the state and to kind of just ruin my progress for that particular day, but not because it was scary, just because it was something that I didn't expect. And so it was just like kind of, whoa, I didn't know that was going to happen kind of a thing. And so when this wave of sleep paralysis reaches my head, I felt this very fast backwards sensation of motion, like this sense of vertigo, like I'm dizzy and moving at the same time. And it only lasted for maybe 3-4 seconds, and then it quit. And what I came to discover is that that's just the sensation of this sleep paralysis reaching my head. I haven't found any practical use for it other than seeing it as a signpost in the road that says I'm making progress. And it really wasn't scary. Like I said, it was just one of those things I didn't expect, and it was the first time I'd ever experienced it. So it was something that ruined that process, at least that one particular time. Now, what I did find is that after I was able to reach this full body asleep state, I actually found that I really enjoyed that feeling, and the fear was just completely gone. Once you can let that lead blanket roll from feet to head once, I would say that it's pretty likely that your fear is just going to be gone completely. It's not something that is going to be scary once you've experienced the entire process once. All right, so now when you're in this state, you're in what some people call the void, this mind awake, body asleep state. I've heard some people say that this void state is scary for them. I've always found it to be comforting and relaxing. I like this big spacious feeling of darkness and floating, just the point of consciousness in this dark, without having conscious awareness of my body. I've always found that to be very meditative and very relaxing. So I don't have great advice on how to bypass that. If that's something that's causing a fearful environment for you, maybe somebody else can share their experiences and what they do to bypass that. Now here, we get to the point where some strange things start to happen, and this is stuff that to this day, just occasionally will still break me out of my progress. And that is, once you get to this state, you start to experience non-physical things, and a lot of that is non-physical noises. So for me, one of the common things that I experience is I experience hearing people or things or whatever in my room. So now sometimes these noises are very clearly non-physical. They're very clearly not in my room, and it's easy to perceive the difference between if somebody were really walking through my door or the noises that I'm hearing. And so I can continue on, kind of just ignore them, just let everything occur as it's going, and proceed with the process. But there's other times where I will hear my door open. I hear somebody walking across my room toward my bed. I know it's not anybody in my family, and there's always that little nagging voice in the back of your mind that says, what if there really is somebody in your house and it's not this non-physical noise that you typically hear this time? What if this one time it's different? And it's that little nagging voice that will ruin my progress. And that, like I said, that still happens to this day, just occasionally. Because it's just so real sounding. It sounds like somebody is in your room. I've had people climb in my bed behind me, and at that point, I'm 99.9% sure that it's not real, but it's still frightening enough or alarming enough that it's very difficult to remain calm and just let that proceed. That you're going to experience occasionally. Fortunately, that doesn't happen very often for me. More often than not, I will hear noises, but it'll be more in the form of voices, which I can clearly tell are not in my physical bedroom, or it'll be music, or just other types of sounds like static or rushing noises, things like that. So it's usually very easy to pass through that particular stage unless it's a very convincing sound of somebody walking through my house. All right, so then we get to the point where this is one of the most commonly talked about topics when you talk about out-of-body experiences, and that is the vibrational state. Now, I had experienced the vibrational state a couple of times. Once when I was 13, unintentionally, had no idea what it was and didn't discover what it was for another 20 years. And then I experienced it once during my first projection, which was actually semi-accidental. So I knew what it was at this point, but that is not a sensation that's easy to get used to. I must have had to have gotten to it probably a dozen times before I was able to proceed past it and remain calm. So that, for me, was a combination of two things. One, repetition, just learning to gain comfort with that sensation. And two, just the way I looked at it. So William Buhlman, in his book, Adventures Beyond the Body, he advises you to bathe in the vibrations. And so when I think of the idea of bathing in vibrations, I think of a calm, relaxing, massage-like type environment where you're allowing these to do their work, and that work is a pleasant thing rather than a scary thing. So that, in combination with some of Frank Keppel's advice, where he talks about seeing these, I think he talks about it in your peripheral vision. I've used that term a few times in my past videos because it works really well for me, is to not focus on them directly. What I started doing is I started looking at the vibrations as though I was perceiving them happen to somebody else, as they happen to somebody else. I was trying to disconnect myself from that process and say, oh, look what's happening over there, instead of, oh, look what's being inflicted upon me. And that combination of sort of seeing those from this third-person point of view, or in my peripheral vision, and then trying to learn to enjoy the sensations rather than see them as something that's scary, both of those things in combination with just reaching the state more and more often, it got to the point where I really love the sensation of the vibrations now, and now I just can't wait to feel it, and it's something that I think about while I'm awake, and I think, oh, I can't wait till the next time that happens. It just becomes a very addictive type sensation. So you'll absolutely get past that. Just stick with it, and if seeing these from like this third-person perspective, or thinking about them as though you were bathing in them, if that helps, by all means, use those visualizations the same way I do. All right, so when you get to this point, you have two decisions. You're now at the point of separation. And this was a point that I got to several times before I actually made the jump and actually separated. At this point, for some reason, your fight or flight reflex, at least me, I should speak personally, my fight or flight reflex kicked in, and I said, I don't know if I want to do this. And it's primarily just due to the unknown. I mean, at this point, I had one unintentional out-of-body experience, but it was an incredible experience and left me excited and just hungry for more. I just wanted to do it again. But then when I actually got to this threshold, this this ledge where I have the choice to either jump off and experience it or turn back and say, well, maybe another day. It was not an easy decision, and I turned back and I chickened out a few times because it's the unknown. It's now you're going to be experiencing things without this physical body that you're so accustomed to experiencing the world in. So at some point, after reading Robert Monroe's book, he said, I got out 20 or 50 or 100, whatever it was, however many times, and he said, I finally came to the conclusion I'm not going to die, it's not going to kill me, so I might as well go with it and enjoy it. And I got to that point. I said, I'm putting all of this time, all of this effort, hours, months, into learning this process, into being able to induce it, and then I'm chickening out at the last minute. So it came to the point where you just have to decide to just jump. You have to let it happen. You have to roll out of bed. You have to just say, whatever happens, I'm gonna go through with it. And this has to be a decision that you make before you even start the whole relaxation process. You say, whatever's gonna happen, I'm gonna go through with it, and it's gonna be incredible. A positive mindset will absolutely help this particular part of the process. All right, so once you are out, unfortunately, the fear doesn't end there. I really like the way that Tom Campbell talks about this next piece that I want to mention. I watched a video with him recently, and he talked about fear. And he said, in our physical waking life, we all have fears, and we tend to keep them inside. We internalize them, we shove them down, we ignore them, we don't acknowledge them. And that's a very natural thing to do. That's something that we all do. But unfortunately, when you get into this out-of-body state where everything is very thought-responsive, that is not always possible. And, it kind of reminds me, I know this is kind of a nerdy comparison, but the first Ghostbusters movie, they're standing around and they're like, all right, everybody clear your head. Don't think of anything. And just, somebody thinks of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and now you've got this giant monster that's destroying the city. So it's very much like that. It's like, you've got this internalized fear that you're so accustomed to just shoving down and ignoring during waking life, and now you're out of body and it's there. It's ready for you to interact with. So I found a few things that I use in regards to this to help me maintain control of this over the situation. So first, I try to avoid watching scary movies, violent movies, listening to negative media coverage, things like that before I'm going to make a serious attempt to get out of body. This just tends to lead to less fearful situations because I don't have those fear-based concepts and ideas just right on the surface of my subconscious mind ready to be presented to me. And then the second thing I would say is that I have by far had much better experiences overcoming these things when I interact with them directly. So when I'm out of body, something fearful presents itself. If I interact with that, and I go up to it, and if it's an entity of some sort, then I try to talk to it, and I try to learn something from it, and I try to interact with it, rather than just running away. I found that I'm not scared the next time, and very often I won't run into that scenario again, and if I do, it was fine last time. I made it through just fine interacting with it, and it's not something that I'm scared of the next time around. So I would highly recommend don't run from things. Just deal with them. They're going to show up. To this day, I still run into scenarios where something scary will just pop up, and it's probably something in my subconscious mind that's now able to manifest. And by far the best way to deal with it is to deal with it, to just meet it face on, and then it will just kind of go away, and you won't have to worry about it in the future. All right, so I would say at that point, we have covered everything that I've run into from a fear-based perspective, anything that caused this barrier that prevented me from getting out of body or kind of stumped my practice for a while. So I'm absolutely positive other folks out there, you guys have your own experiences, you've run into other fears, you found better ways of dealing with these fears, and I would love to have you guys share those. I think that would be beneficial for everybody, and I'd love to hear them as well. So if you would, post in the comments, post on the Facebook group, share advice on how to deal with these fears if you've got better methods than just changing your perspective and repetition, the way that I tend to deal with things. That would be great. But I think that is it for now. So as always, like, comment, subscribe, help me build this community, and I will talk to you guys again soon.